webinar recordings. If you go to, it used to be help.workamajig.com, but we have a new site that's support.workamajig.com. And if you go there, it looks a little bit different, but it is still our help site. And there's a search bar right in the middle of the screen, and you can just put the word webinar in there. And when you search for it, all of those previous webinars, there's been some on custom reporting, I believe, and I think there was even a previous deliverables webinar in there, but definitely some library of webinars that you can listen to. And they're all about an hour long. All right. Well, we've given everybody a couple of minutes, and we are recording this, so people can continue to join even as we're rolling along here, and that's fine. They'll be able to still access everything from the beginning of the call. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize our chat window here, and then you can see I'm logged into my test account, and that's because I've pre-set up a deliverable with more than one round in it so that you can see a compare feature that we offer. But we're going to start with creating a deliverable from scratch. So you do create those within a project, so there does have to be a project. And I've pre-selected a project from my test account here, and it's in my recent. So I'm just going to go to this project that I have pre-set up. Some of you might see the word deliverables along the left-hand side here. And if you do and you like that, great. That kind of mirrors what we used to have in our classic version of the tool. But where it does today here on the that you have in the More section. So More System Settings. If you go to More and you don't see this option of System Settings, it just means that your administrator hasn't given you that security right, and someone who's an admin can set this for the team if you'd like. But if you select Admin, you'll see when you scroll down here that showing the deliverables either on the right-hand side or on the left-hand side is just a toggle switch. So mine is set to show on the right. And if yours is on the left, this takes you to the same place. Now, another thing that folks sometimes don't realize is this little caret can be closed. And so I'll get emails periodically that say, hey, I don't see the deliverables on this project, and I just added it. I know it's here. And that's because they don't have this little caret open. So they don't realize that the deliverable is sitting there, it's viewable, but you have to click into that little grayed out caret to see it. So we're not going to access the one that I have saved here that I just did before our call, though, until we show you round one. But I did want to have a round two set up where we said that we reject the original round so that I could show you a comparison of side-by-side rounds. So we're going to go to the little plus icon and add a new deliverable. And the only thing that's really required here is the name. So we'll say, Testing with Marlene. And of course, you would name it something that, has to do with the file. Sometimes people even include things like versioning, naming conventions here. This is really an open field for you to type whatever you'd like. And then optionally, you can also put a description. You don't have to add a description, but if you do, I'm just going to say this is where the description prints, so you can see where that prints out. And then your owner is going to default to your own name, and then the due date. Now, you would think the due date should be required. That's very important. But this is the due date for the deliverable overall, not for the round. And really, that's the most important thing. This due date field is really only good for querying and looking things up in reporting. And I'll be showing you at the end of the call where you can go to see a list of all your deliverables and filter that however you would need to, but you would make any changes directly within the project. So due date, I'm just going to leave that one blank because it's showing that you don't really have to select a due date there. You're going to select a due date for the round. So you're going to say save here, and that's going to open an option to add the round. I show something that some of you might not show, and that's a to-dos section. That's optional. And if your team doesn't currently use to-dos, you might say, well, that's not something we're familiar with. We would need further training on that. And we're not going to train on that today, so just because we don't have time. But if that's something you want to find out more about, you can always talk to your account manager. Just send an email to support@workamajig.com, and we can get you a complimentary training session set up to go over kind of those different things that we offer as different features in the tool. Now, this summary is going to show all the information that I entered on the previous page. So if for whatever reason I needed to change that, or I decided to add a due date after the fact and I wanted to select that, I could go here to do it. I'm also showing who is going to be the approver on this deliverable, or approvers. You can, of course, have more than one, and you can even route them based on the list and the order that they appear. And then the people that should be notified. Now, some people are confused with, well, how do I decide who should be an approver and who should be notified? A lot of times it might be the designer or the project manager who's on the notify list, and they're getting an email generated by the system letting them know that the deliverable, which is really just a file, it's our name for the file that you're routing, is being rejected, and there's more additional work that needs to be done, or is approved, and that would mean your part in that is complete, unless you were the project manager, and then it might be your responsibility to present it to the client, or it really kind of just depends on the setup that you've selected. We have an option, and it defaults to this option to do both an internal rounds of review, so that's your team internally deciding when it's ready to send to the client, and then there's an external rounds of review. And so that's the client review. You'll see it labeled as that. There is a setting in the transaction preferences, and I'll show you this at the end of the call as well, where you can say, oh, I only want an internal review, or I only want an external review. We leave that up to you for how you want to use the tool. But I don't have to add the approvers and the notifiers here. I'm going to just add them when I add the new round. The reason it's displayed is because, and I'll show you this at the end of the call too, you can designate someone in their employee record to always be an approver, or you can designate them on the project in the team tab to always be an approver. And then that saves you a step. You don't have to physically add them. They're automatically added to the deliverable. So depending on your workflow, and again, this is something that our account managers can help you, your particular account manager can work with you to figure out what's the best workflow for your team, but these are just some of the options that we'll talk about today. All right, so we're going to add the new round. And mine is set up to have an internal review and a client review. So the blue highlighting shows me that we're on the internal review step. And if I want to set up that information, I'm going to click here in the pencil icon to set up the internal review. This is where I'm going to enter instructions. I'm just going to say, this is where the instructions display, because I want to be able to show you on the deliverable where you'll see them. And you can choose to see them even after they've displayed once. So it's a static screen where you'll be able to review them over and over again if you need to. And that's always helpful too when you're sending it to a client for review, because we want this to be very easy and intuitive for our clients. We used to require that those folks, whether they be free users and they'd have to log in and have an ID and a password, no more. In this version of deliverables, what will happen is an email gets generated and they would be set up as a contact in the system. So that's how we'd know what email address to send it to. It would come as a link. They'd click on that link, and it would display the file for them to review, and it's a very intuitive screen. So we'll see that here in just a bit when we send it. And then it's saying send to everyone at once as a default, but if you want to send to people in a particular order, that's an option as well. So if you select that, then in that approver section, you need to put people in, list them there in the order that you'd like it to go. Now, the drawback to send to people in order is if the first person or even the second person in a list of folks rejects it, everyone else in that list does not get to see it. So we default to send to everyone at once because we feel it's a little more collaborative. And that way everybody can give their feedback, so that you're not, sending it out and somebody giving feedback that's like, oh, that's actually how it used to look, until somebody said that they didn't want that. So send everyone at once allows everybody's comments to be seen. Now we're talking about the internal round. So the clients can't see your internal comments. This is just the internal round where your employees are looking at this information. And then if you decide to say everyone must review, that's really only relevant if you have more than one approver there. I'm just going to do an example of just me, myself, as the approver, so that we can get all the way through and show you what it looks like to approve and reject. So we're not going to show with everyone must review today, but if you had multiple approvers, that would usually be one that people would select, everyone must review. Now, what if someone who's on that list traditionally happens to be out of the office? There is a skip feature. So if you said send to everyone at once, but everyone must review, and there was someone listed there who was not going to be able to review this time, you'd see an option to skip on the previous page. We'll show you that in just a minute. The other thing that we have here is some show more buttons, and this is the real actual due date of the deliverable. And it's defaulting to today, and you might notice that this is for our Canadian friends printing correctly, but for anyone in the US, we typically do our month first, but this account is set up as a Canadian account, so that's why you're seeing the date display a little odd. It'll display based on, if you're in the US, you'd see the US display date there. And then the date that it's due. Now, this defaulted to the end of today, 5 p.m., but I could change that. I could say it's really not due until tomorrow, and I can say a particular time that it's due. So if I said it's due at noon, then that'd be 12 p.m. So you can change that. And the reason that's important is because there's another option down here saying, do you want to send reminders? So I'm going to clear these here, but just know that this information is relevant to the do you want to send reminders. If you're not sending reminders, the due date and the time are really irrelevant. So this step should pause after being approved. What we're talking about there is there's two steps under review step, internal review and client review. And sometimes we have multiple files that we're going to send to the client. Maybe an example is that we're going to redo your logo for you, and we're going to give you 3 options. Well, the client is going to be expecting all 3, but this is the, if you don't have this box checked, it's going to send it right to the client once the first deliverable is ready to review. And that's going to prompt them to pick up the phone and call you and say, where are my other 2? So we've defaulted on this one that this step should pause after being approved. And when you do that, it does add an extra step to your internal process. And that is that you'd have to physically go in here and say send for review. If you did not have this checked, then as soon as this was approved, it would shoot off to whoever's listed as the client reviewer. This one doesn't have anyone yet set up as a client reviewer, so even if I did not have this selected, since no one is set up here, it really wouldn't go anywhere. So just a good to know, and a lot of people really like the pause feature, so it looks like we may even be defaulting that on now. But you can always look at the show more and make sure yours is set up that way. This everyone must log in. This is a kind of an answer to, this comes as a link. And if people are just sending this link around, well, they can kind of link in and get into the approval screens and do an approval as that person. So we really sometimes don't want that. And that's what this everyone must log in would do. This kind of takes away the neat the link and not have to log in, but sometimes people want that feature. So we wanted to make it an option to say, well, it's just gonna be a link that goes out, and when we're talking about the client reviewer, they don't have to have a login, they can just click on it. It would probably be a training point to mention to them, oh, please don't forward this email to someone else, because when they click on this, they're basically logging in with your key. So just you would share that if you weren't going to say everyone must log in. And we default everyone must log in to be turned off. So if you want that on, you would just select it with that toggle. And then the time zone, again, this is only important if you're worried about getting notifications out. So you have a 12 p.m. time zone here, but it's talking about 12 p.m. Arizona time. So I could change this, but of course I'm in Arizona, so that's how it knew to select that. But sometimes you're sending the file to someone in another state or another time zone, so that's an option to change it there too. And then the do you want to send reminders? When I click this, I can scroll down and there's going to be more information. So this is looking again back at this date and saying, do you want to send reminders? How frequently? Do you want to send a daily reminder to someone until they approve, or an hourly reminder until someone approves? So this might be if it was like a rush job or something and you really need that client, or in this case, we're still in the internal review round, so that would be our internal co-workers to get a notification through email saying you still haven't approved this, you need to approve it. So usually daily is more common, and then the number of either hours or days before this starts to go out. So you could say 1 day before it starts to go out, send them a daily reminder, or if it's hourly, that's looking at hours, not days. All right, we'll turn that one off. So we'll hit save. And then you can see it captured that information. And then I haven't entered an approver yet, so I'm going to enter myself. Now, it defaults to showing you people that are considered employees that are on the team of the project, but there's many times where you might need to just list your entire staff. And if you do that, then you can pick from the list here. This is a type ahead field. So if you have a lot of folks on your staff, if you start typing the name, it'll come up. And so, you know, and I have actually, looks like if you're not looking at just the team, then you really should be on the team option because it's not repeating my name. So if they're here on the short list, you can grab it. Otherwise, you can switch it to staff to find them. So I'm just going to add myself for this one. And it shows that it's waiting, meaning it hasn't even been sent to me. And it shows where it's going to go. And then once it's sent, it'll time date stamp that so I can see that it's been sent. I'll see the due date, and once I complete it, I'll see that date completed as well in there. And that's helpful when you have multiple approvers. And then the notify section, when you're testing this on your own, you may want to add both yourself to the approver list and the notify list. You don't have to be either or, you could be on both, just so you can see what those notifications are going to look like when they come out. One thing I do recommend is when you get to the client portion, which a lot of people do like to test that, don't use your internal email address for your company because you won't get a clear view of really what the client sees. Use a Hotmail or Gmail or generic email account that you have associated with your name that you can look at and truly set up a test in that way. And we can help you with that as account managers as in your support at workamajig.com. So if you say, hey, we'd really like to run through testing of this, we'd need your help with that, we'll give you a few more hints and tips on the best way to set the testing up so that you get the results that are most true. All right, and then the round, we don't even have a file yet attached here, so we need to get a file that we're actually going to send for review. So we're going to add a new file. And then if there was an existing file that was here in the file section, I could say use an existing file. We also can route URLs, Vimeo videos, YouTube videos. We're just going to do a simple one here. Again, if you have other options, you can with your account manager. We're just going to upload a new file that I have saved to this computer. So it brings up your files that are here. We'll pick Ron Burgundy here and open that. And then you can see that it's a PNG. So the different file limitations, file sizes, types of files that can be used, that's all in the help guide under files. And again, if you want, you can email your account rep and they can send you that link so you don't have to try to hunt for it yourself if you can't find it right away. All right, so we have our approver on here, we have our file. This is letting us know that it's round 1 and it's not yet sent, and we're ready to send it. So we're gonna say send for review. And that's what generates those emails to go out. Now, I'm already logged into Workamajig and I'm in the deliverable, so I don't have to go out to my email to access this. I can just hit view comments, and you're going to get the same look that you would get if you were clicking through the email that's received with the email link. Now, sometimes people will have trouble with the link, and so we always provide a second, shorter link that you can cut and paste into your browser, but we really, usually you can just click on the link and you get right in, but depending on the browser and if it's out of date and that kind of thing, sometimes we see issues where people have to cut and paste. So those instructions are all in the email for them. Now, this is showing the image, but if I wanted to rotate it or if I wanted to make it larger or smaller, I have that information down here. You can hover over these and it tells you, oh, I want this to fit the width of the screen, or I want this to fit the height. And you can't see these probably too well because it's way down at the bottom, but every one of these options, if you hover over it, it tells you what clicking on it will do. This will make it fill the full screen, for instance. This will print it the actual size so you can see it. And then typically people would start to add their comments and say either, I need this changed or that changed. If they loved it just exactly how it is, comments are optional. You do not have to make comments. You can go right to make a decision. Now, sometimes if you say, well, I don't see the make a decision button, that could be affected by the way somebody set the deliverable up. So if they set it up that not everybody has to approve it, there's 3 approvers and any one person can approve it, then by the time you get to the link, you might say, well, there is no make a decision. That's going to indicate to you that the setup was such that, somebody else has already approved it. And if you wanted to confirm that, you could access that project and see that in the deliverable section where it either says waiting or approved. It gives you all the details of what's actually happened with that deliverable. We also have another feature here where it says, I want approve to approve with changes. And sometimes that just doesn't work with folks' workflow. They want it cut and dry. Either it's approved or rejected, essentially, which is what please resubmit is. So we do now have that as a feature where you can, as a system setting, where you cannot display approve with changes, because what that really is telling the user is, you don't have to resend it to me. I want you, for instance, to change his tie stripe to blue, but you no need to resend it to me. I don't need to see what that looks like. And that's a little bit more rare, I think, than what we realize. So some people say, well, I don't really want them to even have that option. And if you go to more and you go to system settings, that's where you'll see the options to either show or don't show it. I have it selected to show, but if you deselect it, it doesn't even show that yellow option there. You also can select here that you want to require that somebody has to put an annotation directly on the image, and we're going to show you how to do that in just a second with the comments when they make a comment. And I don't know if some workflows require that. They just don't want you to make a comment because they're like, well, I don't know what you're talking about in here. What you can say, change the stripe in his tie, but do you mean this stripe, or all the stripes? So it makes you add an actual annotation on there, and we'll show you how to add that annotation optionally. I don't have that one turned on to require it. We also have advanced tools showing here. So if you're looking at your version of this and following along and you say, I don't see all the same markup items that she has there, it's because I have that advanced tools option turned on. And then there's a feature to say, always load the review items at an actual size. So even if you don't have that selected, that was one of my options here where it said that I could load it actual size. It's one of these you just have to hover over this one here. Okay, so we're going to show you how, and by the way, here's your instructions, and we're going to show you how you can add comments. So you're going to come in here and select the comments, the two chat bubbles, and then you have the option to say add a new comment, and then, change the tie color, whatever you want to say. And then I'm not required to do this because it's not set up in my settings, but I want to also take this arrow, I'm clicking on it to pick it up, and then I want to point to that's the tie color I want to change. So I might even say, I want to even be more clear and say, change the tie color from yellow stripe to blue, something like that. And then you're going to say save. And then it's going to show a time and date stamp, who did that. And this is my little character that I have saved as my avatar in Platinum. And it's going to say that I didn't make a decision. All I did was include information. So if I were to add another comment, and this one I won't pick up a tool. So now you can see where's that comment from the first. If I click on this, then it brings the number out there. You could just say, I want to show all the markups, and then everything would show no matter what you're clicking on here. We just have this option to hide them because if you have lots of comments and lots of annotations, this can be kind of messy and you can get confused. Well, which comment is this one associated with? Now they are numbered, so that does help. So I can see this is number 1, and even if I hover over it, it tells me. So we've tried to make that as clear as possible for folks, and those are all some new changes. So if you've looked at deliverables before and you say, oh, I don't remember that it used to do that, that's because it's new and improved. So there are some new things that you can do in here. Now, once I'm ready to make a decision, I would come up here and do that. But before I do that, I want to show you some other features. I can organize these comments in different ways. So if I hover over this, it's doing it by a time and date stamp. Of course, we just did this all on the same day, so there's not much to see there right now. Or I can just do it by date. So if there's multiple days in there, you'd see that. And then as far as like seeing the instructions again, I can click here to see those again. If I want to download this document, I'm just clicking on the little show files section, and it's showing me that there's one file here. If this was a multi-page document, I'd see each page represented by a little thumbnail up here. And if I hover over this, this is how I could just view it. But if I wanted to actually download it onto my computer, I would do that here. And that's important to know because if you send a Word file, you won't be able to mark it up directly on the screen. You'll need to download it first. And usually people want to do that because they have a proofreading tool that they want to run it through, a Grammarly or something like that. So you would download it and you would be able to make any kind of changes, mark it up, and then you could add it as an attachment so that people could see those changes that you made. So this is an alternative to marking it up and making the comments right on the screen. And again, mostly only used if it's a Word document or some document that you can't actually mark up in this tool. So we're going to actually close this. It's a toggle. So where it says show files, I'll click again and it'll go away. But if I were to do that, download it, change it, and now I want to upload it so it's still included here for somebody to be able to view, I would go to the comments section and I would add a new comment. I would say, oh, I've uploaded, the version that, or the changes that I want you to make. And then you would pick an attachment. You would pick your uploaded changes that you made and say open, and I'll just pick this one even though it's the same image just so you can see what it looks like. It shows you the little caption as a thumbnail here. So then you would say save, and the person would see, oh, there's an actual attachment to this comment that someone's made, and they'd be able to click here and open that. You also can see when you hover over this that there's a way that you could add a reply directly to this comment. You can edit this comment if you have the security rights, and if you're the one that made the comment particularly, that's a default security right, but there's even security rights you can give folks to edit other people's comments. And of course, if I wanted to delete it, I could just click on the garbage can and that would delete it. This fix this might be a new feature for some of you if you've tried or looked at deliverables in the past and don't remember seeing that. If you click on it, it allows you to actually add a task to your schedule. So I could say I want to use an existing task, and this pulls up all my tasks that I have there. Or I could say I'm actually ready to add a brand new task to the schedule, and then it opens up new fields because there's a lot more that you need to populate. So I could add the task name. I could put where do I want it in the schedule, which task should it follow. So I could put it right here, smack dab in the middle. You don't have to put it at the end of your task list. And then you could say the date and start, due date, duration. You can even select a priority. And then the constraint, it defaults to as soon as possible, which is what most people would want there. And then the status. So those statuses, these are to-do status. So if you don't see this and you don't see this little red required, that's only because, again, that's a feature that I have turned on here that you may not have turned on in your system. It may not even be a feature that works with your workflow, but we have it here, and I thought I'm not going to hide it. I'm going to show people that it's an option, and that can possibly spur a conversation with your account manager if you do want to use to-dos. And then the assigned people send notifications. If you want to generate an email to those folks that you just assigned here, you can, but we made the task, we haven't actually put a person's name on it. If you select their name and usually their service, and usually you allocate hours or fractions of hours, then you could say save, and that would send them an email. That's optional. You don't have to send them the email if you don't want to. You could just add an assignment. And insert row lets you put more than one person on that task assignment. So we're going to hit cancel, though. We're not going to add a task in there for now. We just want to show you that that's a feature. Now, as far as the More button goes here, this is also where I'd go to print. This is where I'd go if I wanted to jump back to the dashboard within Workamajig. This is go to the latest round and say, okay, well, I need to remove somebody here. Again, takes you back to Workamajig. And then the system settings we talked about just a little bit as well. So you can change that for everyone, change it for just a particular security group, whatever you need to do there. You also see an invite others option. You could put anyone's email address there at all. They don't even have to be a contact in your system. So that's usually used on the client review round. All these things look the same on the client review as they look on the internal review, which is where we are right now. So we won't cover them again because it's the same fields. So I'll mention right now that this is more typically used on the client review round, where we'd want to say, hey, this person needs to look at this. Maybe it's the supervisor or boss of the client that we originally were sending this to, someone that needs to weigh in on it. They won't have the option to make a decision here, but they'll still get an email that's generated with the link to open the screen, and then they could still add comments. So that's kind of a nice feature. If you don't have login required selected on the back-end setup, you won't even see this as an option to invite somebody. So, all right, we will hit cancel. We're not going to send an invite today. All right, so I am going to show you now, because a lot of people always want to see, well, I want to see like round 2 or how you can compare rounds. I don't see an option to do that. And you don't have that if a decision hasn't been made to reject the round completely. So before our call, I preloaded another deliverable. And before we go in there and look at that and show you the difference between, comparing rounds and that sort of thing, I just wanted to finish showing you here that if you go into the client review, it's the exact same fields, identical fields that we just reviewed for the internal review. So you could set that up and you can standardize that. We have a way to standardize it in the backend transaction preferences, so you're not always having to change it. And we'll show you that here in a bit as well. But we're not going to bother in setting up a client review. We're going to just go right into showing you the other deliverable that I pre-set up, and that's this first one that was that's labeled round 2 here. So if we click on this, and then we go to the comments section, it's a different picture, and I did that so I was sure that I was in the other deliverable. So if you come in here and you say, hey, there was already a round 1 here that was rejected, and so then the next round that I set up is round 2, and that's where you're going to see compare or edit last round. You didn't have those options in the last deliverable that we were looking at because that one had not yet been rejected. So if you come in here and you say compare, if you had more than one round in here, you'd be able to compare, for instance, round 1 with round 4 to see, well, how did this originally look and where did we end up? There's really only one other round in here. So if this is round 2, we only see the option to compare round 1. And then I can see, oh, why did they make the changes that they made here? Well, I can see the comments where we were instructed to make those changes. So kind of nice to just be able to see that. Everything's a toggle, so if you're ever trying to push something back in and you can't figure it out, just click on it again and that usually gets rid of it. So this is a way to compare. And then the other option that was in here was edit the latest round. So this takes you so that you know that, okay, this is round 2 and I need to get rid of somebody that's on this list. And I always use that as an example because that's usually what people are looking to do, is skip an approver. So that's the option there. So I wanted to show you that. The other thing is I wanted to show you when you're ready to add a new round, what if I need to go in here and say I'm going to reject this original round that we did, which was raw burgundy here. We're going to say make a decision, and I'm going to say please resubmit. I don't like it. I gave you instructions for what I want you to do to change it. So when it comes time to send that second round out, and you come in here and you go into this, it shows, oh, it needs to be resubmitted. So I would come in here and I would be able to see, how do I create a new round? Do I want it just to be the same as the last round? Do I even want to include the same files from the last round? Usually people do. That's why it's the first option. So it explains it's going to copy all the reviewers, all the notifiers, the descriptions, timeframes, everything's going to be copied. You can change it once it's copied, but it's going to copy everything. Or you could just start from scratch and say, I'm going to create a brand new system. More commonly would use this. So we're going to select this and say same as last round. So I'll say send for review and then view comments, but of course you're usually accessing it through the email link that's sent. And now you're going to see that this one has compare rounds. So it's got round 1 in there. So I wanted to be able to show it to you, but then I also wanted to show you how I got there and how I was able to create that second round. And you would just keep going with the rounds of revisions until it is approved. All right, so we're going to jump out of here now because I want to show you some of that back-end setup that we talked about. And again, you do have to have system access. So if anybody is attending today that isn't an admin or just doesn't have access to this area of the system, just see your system administrator locally. They can change this and do this for you. If they have any questions about it or need assistance, they can have their support person at just support@workamajig.com guide them on where they need to do this setup. It's also in the help guide. So if you go into the help guide and you just search deliverables, you'll see all of these things that we covered today. All right, so we're going to go to the main menu here, and then we're going to go to admin, system setup, and it's a transaction preference. So we are going to jump into transaction preferences, and then there's a subset called deliverables. And so you'll see this looks fairly familiar because it's the internal and the client review steps, and you're just selecting how you want to default things to work. So even if you default them, they still have the ability on the front end to change those defaults. So it's not like it's a a set thing. If I pick the default, there won't be an option to change it. You can still change it. But this is just setting it so you don't have to go in and do it each time. You can even standardize instructions. There's options in here to send an email each time someone adds a comment. Sometimes people turn that on during testing because they just want to see how it works, but it can get overwhelming if you have, several people approving and lots of comments being made. It generates a whole lot of emails. So that we have that available to turn on and off. You have to turn it off universally or on universally. There's no setting that's per person. And then this use to do items with deliverables, remember I said I had that turned on. Most of you probably do not because that's not a default. That's more of an advanced feature. So you would turn that off here, on here, if you decided you wanted to explore that. And then use status with deliverables. So that has to do with the to-do statuses as well. What status is the to-do in? Is it done, complete, assigned? So that's another option that's related to that. And then send notifications to notify users when the deliverable is sent for review. So that generates an extra email that says, hey, we've sent you a deliverable to review. But they're already getting an email with a link in it that says you have a file to review. So I don't know, somebody must have needed that or wanted that, but that starts to get to be a lot of emails that can be a little confusing, but it is an option. And then review step options. This is defaulted to show both the client and internal review step, but if you are not quite ready to roll this out to clients yet, and you just want to explore it internally and use it for your internal rounds of revision, you can temporarily or forever even turn this to just internal review only. And then you won't have both options when you go in to set up the deliverable. And we'll just hit save because everything here on the client side is a repeat. So there's nothing new. If you know everything on the internal side, it's the same fields on the client side. So we'll just hit save there. And then remember that I said that if you wanted to default in approvers or folks to be notified, that you could do that in the employee record or in the team tab of the project, wherever it makes most sense for your workflow and who approves what. It's also optional to do it just the way we showed today, which is just pick the approver as you need them. But sometimes people have this standardized or it's the same person every time, and we want to make that a little bit of a shortcut for them. So in the employee section, under your employee name, there's an option under projects and time to say under deliverables, make them a default reviewer, or which is an approver or rejector, and the default notifier of updates. So you can be one or the other or both, and then that automatically, every single time a deliverable is opened, it knows to add Dave, for instance. Now, if you go to the project level to do that, we'll just jump back into that project that we were in earlier. And on the team tab, this is where you would say, it's called subscriptions here. So this is where you would say, okay, these people should be automatically subscribed to deliverable defaults, either to be notified every time it's approved or rejected, or to be the actual approver or rejector on the deliverable itself. So if you set this, then any deliverable that's created as part of this project would automatically include these folks. Again, those are both optional. You don't have to set that. Even setting those back-end system settings is optional because you can always just choose on the fly how you want to enter that deliverable information. So that is pretty much in a nutshell, like the vanilla version of how to use deliverables. But of course, people do have specific questions or specific ways that they would like to explore using it, or just, can we do this? Can we do that? And so this is kind of a jumping off place to start a conversation with your support person, your account manager, who can give you more detailed workflows as far as, if you tell them, oh, well, the project manager does this, and the art director is involved at this point, real specific scenarios that you want to outline for a workflow. They can always help you with that as well. A lot of people can just come up with their own workflow now that they know how it works. We try to leave it very open-ended so that you can pretty much implement however your team needs to use it. All right, I said this at the beginning of the call, but it's possible that some of you joined after, so I just wanted to let you know where you can find this. It is going to be on the support.workamajig.com website, And if you search for webinar, it's usually about 24 hours before you'll see it there as a link. And there's other webinars to check out there as well. So while you're waiting for it, if you have time, you can look at some of those custom reporting, the charts and graphs, some of the recent webinars we've done on different topics.